and I'd like to welcome you this evening to the Maine Irish Heritage Center's annual Claddagh Award celebration. My name is Mark Hutchins, and I'm chair of the board of the center this year. Tonight we're holding our 11th annual Claddagh celebration. The Claddagh Award is given to a person who has dedicated his or her life to service within the Maine community. I'm pleased to say that tonight, the board of the Maine Irish Heritage Center honors David Flanagan. He is one whose leadership, hard work, and dedication has made a huge difference in the lives of the citizens of Maine. For those of us who are fortunate to know him, and those who will never know his name, but he's been there for them. We are fortunate to be joined this evening by many previous recipients of this award. First, Governor Joe Brennan, Cynthia Murray, Jim Wellahan, I think he was supposed to be here this evening. Couldn't make it. Michael Conley. And our last year's awardee, Senator Susan Collins. So if you could all stand and be recognized. In addition to Governor Brennan and Senator Collins, we have a few other honored guests with us here tonight. U.S. Representative Jim Longley, University of Southern Maine's President Glenn Cummings, University of Maine Augusta's President Becky White, State Representatives Mo Terry and Lois Galgay-Reckitt, and also Senator Margaret Craven. Along with business and industry leaders, Doug Herling of CMP, Chris Pierce of Dingley Press, George Campbell of the James W. Sewell Company, and Greg Powell of the Harold Alfond Foundation. I also want to take this time to thank our sponsors for tonight's event. Your gifts support the mission of the Maine Irish Heritage Center, which is to promote Irish heritage, history, culture throughout Maine, and to continue to serve as a gathering place for Maine's new immigrants and to preserve this landmark, our Irish Cathedral of Maine. At this time, I also need to give a special thank you to this year's Emerald sponsor, and that is the Harold Alfond Foundation. Greg, could you please stand again? On behalf of the center, I thank you, Greg, and the foundation for all you do for our great state of Maine. So at this time, we're going to be having dinner. But before that, I'd like to ask Margaret Craven if she could come up and give us a blessing.
Thank you. Jaibilik, agus falte den usla. You're very welcome to the Irish Heritage Centre, and especially all of our special guests. I'm Margaret Craven, and I'm going to recite a prayer in Irish. I'm an Irish speaker from Connemara, and I actually serve in the Maine legislature. On the head at Tarnav, Ganiftanam, Gadruch, Ganunta the Helen Tava, Mardian Tarnav. Tarwan Yava, Leholis Mahoner Biha, Vichani Hen, Sladikshnaga, Sirshnewalk, Amen. There's the experience, Amen. Enjoy your dinner.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank some individuals who, through their hard work and dedication, pulled everything together for tonight's celebration. First, it's Mary McElhaney. Vinnie O'Malley. Pat McBride. Ann Lackey. Janine Manning. Dan Mahoney and Kimberly Clark of Dan Mahoney Presents. Josh Swan of Media Northeast. The Claddagh Pipe Band. And Dale Rand Printing. And also, along with a special thanks to our founding partner of the Center, the Maine Irish American Club of Maine. Also, I don't want to forget Sopo Catering for their wonderful food tonight and their service. And also, I mentioned that we had former honorees here tonight, and at the time that I mentioned everyone, Jim Wellahan hadn't arrived yet, but he is here now, and I'd like to recognize him. And also another sponsor who's been very good to the center over the years, and that's Ed Kane with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. The last group I'd like to thank, and I believe that our organization is blessed to have a number of volunteers that are passionate about our center and are always willing to give their all for the betterment of the center. Without their efforts, none of this tonight would have been possible. I thank you all. And following the video, we'll have 5 speakers. So please sit back and enjoy.
My great-grandparents. They came over from, I think, Queenstown, Cork, and the story we had in our family is they started walking from Halifax to Boston and got as far as Bangor and said to hell with it. My mother was a nurse by profession, but she had 8 kids at home, so that sort of became like a full-time job until the last one was out of high school, and then she went back to nursing, actually. My father was in the insurance business. He got a promotion, and so he had to leave the Eastern Maine Territory to take over the whole state of Maine.
My brother said, the average IQ of the neighborhood tripled when the Flanagans moved in.
When we got down here to Portland, the school assigned us to the business track. Well, that lasted for one day until my mother found out, and she was up there like a banshee to straighten them out.
Education has always been a bedrock of the entire Flanagan family, and every one of them is accomplished.
A great pair. They're both really supportive of each other's interests.
Kay didn't want to have anything to do with me or anybody else. I was with two other guys. One of whom was a priest in street clothes, and the other was a juvenile delinquent. And Kay always said, I wasn't sure which one I was supposed to go out with, but I didn't like any of them.
I met David in the early 60s. I was in the legislature, and David came into my office. I think he had just come back from England. You know, he's fancy education at Harvard and schools in London and several other places. But then he was young, lots of hair, kind of a beard, spouting Russian statements and so forth. I thought the guy was very, very left. He was actually up, I think, to visit a friend of mine, Jerry Conley. He was a law student, and each summer he'd work for me, and each Christmas vacation he'd be down there, always ready to work, like my brain.
It was a great experience because, you know, we were right in there, right in the middle of it.
He wrote all sorts of stuff.
I finished law school, which took me a little extra time because I'd been working full-time in the Senate here at the University of Maine Law School. And then I went to work for Dick Barringer at the Bureau of Public Lands, working on public lands.
And then he came with me at the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
Couldn't get rid of the guy.
And later I became an Assistant Attorney General, again in conservation.
He did such a great job. The leading firm, most prestigious firm in the state, Pierce Atwood at that time, probably still is, hired him.
Well, I was perfectly happy at Pierce Atwood, and I was, you know, for the first time in my life, and living in Portland, everything was good. And Brennan called me up and he said, you know, I'd like you to come up there. And I said, well, you know, things are looking pretty good here. And he said, listen, he said, I'm opening a store on January 5th, and I need somebody behind the cash register.
Now, I was so pleased that he came because, as I say, in lieu of having encyclopedias, he was right there. There wasn't a thing he didn't know a lot about except sports.
Yes.
And you really didn't need a lot of information about sports to be an effective governor.
Soon after I got back to Pierce Atwood, where again I was thinking that's where I'm going to be for the duration, hapless CMP.
He started representing Central Maine Power Company. And as they say, lo and behold, 8 or 10 years later, he was the CEO. Actually, he was with the most powerful company, no pun intended.
Everything that could go wrong with any electric company anywhere in America, all those things happened to us simultaneously.
Being Irish, he just wants to make it as hard as possible for himself to succeed.
100 years of a quasi-monopoly tradition, and people had expectations of doing things the way they'd always been done, and it just wasn't working.
It required a management team that could communicate with the regulators and try to implement their strategies while still respecting the interests of investors. And that's what we did. Under David, the stock of the company improved dramatically.
I take a lot of pride in that we did get it back onto a profitable basis.
Well, I paid my bill promptly. Otherwise, I suspect he'd be at the door knocking.
But it was clearly, David set the direction. He said, this is where we're going to take the company. We're going to excel at working in this new environment. We're going to do what we need to do for the customers.
We did away with old-fashioned ads on television and replaced it with a safety campaign, and came up with good old Jim Wright, who was an honest-to-God CMP employee and as authentic as you can get, because he was, and with the tagline, "No line is safe to touch ever." And that not only was good for favorability, the number of accidents also went down. So it served all kinds of good purposes.
David clearly set the tone. I mean, he set the direction, and although we tried to compliment him, we needed to see where he wanted to go and to support that every way we could, and that's really the way it was.
When I took over, I'll never forget this, our favorability rating was about 44%, which was the lowest of any utility in the United States of America. And after 3 years of this economizing, and trying to be customer friendly, we got it up to about 80%, which was above most companies.
When the ice storm hit.
Travel conditions will be deteriorating all afternoon.
Well, Mother Nature has us in a headlock right now.
I think the media sometimes overdoes the weather stories, but this one is real.
At noon today, I declared a state of civil emergency in Maine.
You have a reported transformer fire.
The ice continues to thwart the best efforts of the repairmen.
I've been through 2 hurricanes, and I think this is worse than those were.
I got to give credit to Mark Ishkanian, who was our communications director. I was scheduled to go out on that January morning, and Mark said, I've been reading the weather reports, and I think you'd better stay home. And that was the best advice I ever got from anybody on anything.
The ice storm was described then as a 1 in 500 year event, which is very indicative of how much planning you could really do for such an event.
CMP has 82 crews out and almost 50 trucks coming in from out of state to help. But restoring all power may take days.
We had a very solid line worker department and people that knew how to operate the system, but we had never experienced in the history of the company anything like losing 2/3 of your customers for up to 3 weeks.
There was a major job there. We had a book of emergency procedures, and there were a lot of people in the company who were familiar with it, which sort of gave us a skeleton of what to do. But of course, when you get to the actual event, things are different from what is in the book.
And it could have been a disaster in all respects if we had been slow to respond, if we had been unresponsive to customers.
There was a lot of management that went into coordinating all these services, new crews coming in from out of state, getting help from the National Guard and the Department of Transportation, and the outpouring of help we got from the general public, and trying to communicate with people when most of them didn't have power. So that was a challenge.
David was basically working 24 hours a day. He met with the governor, he met with Al Gore, and he kept the morale up and he kept the operation operating efficiently. But to have him out on the front lines and at night, in the morning, was a very reassuring message. Usually at about 11 o'clock at night, we broke out the bourbon.
It was a tremendously demanding, but in a way exhilarating experience for a couple of weeks.
Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, and Senator Collins was at that time chair of the Senate committee that was going to be responsible for reviewing the performance of the federal government. Who did she turn to run that investigation, a federal investigation, but David?
She was more demanding of herself than anybody else, and she was demanding of everybody else.
So David comes in, and he's got a $12.5 million deficit. He's got declining enrollment. He's got a demoralized campus. The business and philanthropic communities are looking at USM, and they want so much for it to succeed. They know how critical it is to the region.
Because he had headed up so many important commissions.
He really loves the state, understood how important higher education is to the state.
So he had a daunting challenge.
He just came in with a more objective, outside perspective.
He came on, and we knew we had the right leader, in particular the right Irish leader.
He assembled a great top-tier team.
David's brought some real focus to the thinking about what are we going to be.
And it took a lot of very hard decisions that no one was really happy with, but it was the right thing to do.
He restored some confidence on the part of the business community and the philanthropic community. He stabilized the finances, balanced the budget, stabilized enrollment, and the morale on campus. That doesn't turn around overnight. And there were, during his time, he angered some traditionalists who didn't want to deal with the change, but he did what was necessary, and the board was very, very grateful.
For me, it was one of the blessings of public higher education in this era.
His 1 year there was very stressful for him, but very successful and beneficial for us.
As we look forward, a very bright future for USM.
Alphon is an extraordinary organization, institution.
His huge knowledge of the state and just his political understanding of how things work have made him an invaluable board member.
You mean other than curmudgeon?
in a room full of people where you are trying to come up with a good solution.
He sees through any kind of fog or ambiguity or BS that someone might want to try to talk. He's not going to buy that.
He has an outstanding capability to understand where everyone is coming from.
On the Alphon board, he asks tough questions, and he's got a very good sense of what will work and what won't.
And to, in a deferential, sensitive way, advance an idea forward that really helps build consensus.
Having some vision of what you want to achieve and developing some little plan of how to get there, recognizing the need to adapt as you move along, but having some plan and, as Governor Brennan taught me, get the strongest, most capable people you can to help accomplish the job.
He likes to be captain, which is fine. Everybody needs a captain. But he wants to be captain of a team.
David's a very incisive thinker.
And methodically approaches planning to straighten the ship out. And so he has that capability through his clear analytical thinking.
He really keeps you honest, and you have to deliver the goods with him.
He's tireless and really in pursuit of knowledge and trying to prepare someone for both sides of the issue. No, you don't get them any better than David.
I also think, David, obviously, throughout his whole career, even at CMP, during the ice storm, all that, David is a public servant. He's a real Mainer.
I don't know that anyone has ever attempted to count how many models are down there, but there are models in every direction. And he has beautiful model ships in his living room, but he also had a diorama of a World War II battlefield. There were soldiers and the formations. All the details were accurately portrayed. Absolutely fantastic.
And remember, no line safe to touch, ever.
Hi, I am Frank O'Hara, longtime friend of David's, and see a lot of distinguished people here tonight. So many, it's hard to acknowledge everybody. Seen former governors here, and then there are representatives of prospective governors here tonight, and also there's an even more distinguished group, wannabe governors, people who either have run for governor or think, I'm smarter than that guy, I should be the governor. And of course, Berenger, I don't know, where are you? And Severin, you're one of them. And of course, David himself is one of that honored group. And I hope, do you all remember David running for governor? Everybody remember? Yeah. And how many voted for David? Okay, that's good. Okay, he didn't make it to the ballot. That was a trick. That was a trick question. Anyway, I want to say we're here to celebrate David's head and his heart. His head is a little bit better known than his heart, to be honest with you. He's unusual among Irishmen because he's good with numbers and with budgets and so forth, and not many of us are. The only other Irishman who is good at that stuff is actually Joe Brennan,
But David learned his statistics at Harvard and the London School of Economics, and Joe was at the pool hall and the horse track. But they all ended up in the right place. I've had the privilege of staffing several commissions that David has run. He takes on the very toughest challenges, as the video showed, CMP in Bulgaria and the Maine Yankee and the University of Maine, FEMA, and so forth. But he's equally fearless, not just in taking on challenges, but in the way he thinks about solutions. He follows the facts wherever they lead him. And I just give one example. When he was involved in the university study, looking at the University of Maine as a whole, the structure. The conventional wisdom when we started that study was that the small campuses were financial drains to Orono, and that was a problem. And David, of course, dives into the numbers, and you can see his feet kicking among all the data sheets. And he comes back up and he says, it's the other way around. The small campuses make you money, and the larger campus is a financial drain. So it wasn't a popular answer that David comes, but that's what David, he's absolutely straight. He looks at the facts, gives the answer, and that's why so many people want him on these tough problems, because he just tells it the way it is. And so much for his head. Now to his heart, it's even bigger. David is loyal to Maine. There are many opportunities for a young man from Harvard and London School of Economics around the country to make a lot of money. David came home. David is a loyal and wonderful son to his parents, Tom and Connie. He's a great booster of his brothers and sisters, supportive and generous uncle to his nephews and nieces, and a loving, if not particularly skilled around the house, husband to Kay. But David holds all of us to a very high standard. Every Christmas I get a card from David. It has several charts and graphs in it. And he evaluates me on a 1 to 10 scale on a series of metrics: personality, friendliness, intelligence, and so forth. He compares me to a peer group of similar people and then suggests some best practices from around the nation that could improve me in the next year. So, David, thank you very much for the feedback. And tonight we give you some feedback. You're the best. Congratulations. So now we have Mary Ann Lynch.
Thank you, Frank. That was really wonderful. And it'll be hard to follow that one. But Senator Collins, Governor Brennan, David, and Kay, my name is Mary Ann Lynch, and I am so grateful to be here tonight for this wonderful gathering of David's friends and family. We're all here this evening to honor a kid from Bangor who became one of Maine's most prominent Irish Americans, David Flanagan, or as I know him best, DTF. I first met David in 1978. I was a lowly college kid volunteering on the Brennan for Governor campaign. And David, from my vantage point, was one of the big shots, along with people like John O'Leary, Tom Allen, Larry Spiegel, and a lone woman in that group, Janet Mills, all writing speeches and discussing important public policy. But even back then, I, a college student, discovered that David was a regular, down-to-earth guy, known for his hard work, his good judgment, and a special knack for choosing neckties every morning. David and I bonded over a very simple question. What number are you? Now, if you're Irish and you're from a large family, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And David and I are both number one. We quickly became close friends when we worked together in Governor Brennan's office. And at one point, we had side-by-side offices, and we shared a door in between the connecting wall. I want to say David was about 32 or 33 at that time, and he routinely used words like approbation, res judicata, opine, and moral imperative. I was impressed. But Governor Brennan, with the concurrence of Davy Redmond, had to limit David's appearances on the third floor of the State House. David is well known for his work ethic, and people have talked about that already, and his willingness to take on the most daunting tasks. Long before taking on the challenges of USM, and long before setting, and I will say this, the industry standard for crisis management in the ice storm, David proved his mettle. In David's third year of law school, he served as the sole legislative aide to the Maine Senate Democrats. Today, about a dozen full-time employees do the work that David was doing while attending law school. Truth be told, this is kind of a secret in this room, David is known among Maine Democrats as a bit of a political conservative. But he is, after all, from the 2nd Congressional District, not from Munjoy Hill. David proved his conservative chops in college. While the leading liberals of the day were members of the SDS and occupying the Harvard president's office, David showed himself to be solidly center-left as an active member of the Harvard College Democrats. Now, on a serious note, I spent many years working in the male-dominated electric utility industry, where I had the good fortune to once again be working with David. And I want to say here, the number of women that David mentored, encouraged, and gave meaningful responsibility to was unmatched at that time, and probably still is today in the utility industry. Sarah Burns would never have been president of Central Maine Power, and I would never have been vice president and general counsel of Maine Yankee, but for David's support and encouragement. And these are just two examples. I could cite many more, both in government and the private sector. And David was an unsung hero of the Me Too movement, too, long before there was a Me Too movement. When I was 35 and I became general counsel of Maine Yankee, there was an officer and board member, and all of you women out there of a certain age like me, we all know this. There was an officer and a board member who was the master of the double entendre, the innuendo, the sitting too close, and all those other little things that leave you feeling just a little uncomfortable on a daily basis. I put up with the harassment for a while, but eventually I sought David out, who was also on the Maine Yankee board. David listened to me, and he did his due diligence, and I never had a problem again. So thank you, David, for being ahead of your time. I want to say that was back in maybe 1991, maybe 91, 92. So, David, you are, in my book, number one, but not just because of birth order, but because of your judgment, your character, and your integrity. I thank you for being a wonderful mentor and a friend, and speaking for everyone here tonight, I thank you for all that you have done for the great state of Maine.
Help the old lady up. Good evening, David. These are Janet Mills' 7 pages of comments about David. Governor-elect Mills about David Flanagan. I regret that I cannot attend this dinner in person to congratulate David Flanagan, my friend of more than 50 years, on receiving the prestigious Claddagh Award. As luck would have it, I'm out of state at the National Governors Conference. They let me in early. Or baby governor's school, being trained in all things gubernatorial. More than a year ago, a local magazine described David Flanagan's resume as follows. David T Flanagan, Director at the Harold Alfond Foundation, Director at Maine General Medical Center, Director at Dead River Incorporated, former CEO of Central Maine Power Company, Chair of the Board of Visitors of Muskie School of Public Service, Chair of the American University in Bulgaria, former independent candidate for governor, University of Maine, and on and on and on. What a resume. But what his resume does not capture is the spirit of inquiry and adventure that David really represents. David is 180 days older than I am. We both grew up in Maine. We both became lawyers. You would think that our paths would have crossed early on, but they did not. We did not meet until both of us were far from home, exploring Europe, expressing our individual spirits of adventure in a wider world. Maybe David will tell you how we met, but in case he doesn't, or in case he tells it wrong, here it goes. I was 21 years old and allegedly studying at the Sorbonne in Paris, France, that is. I was fascinated with the poet Federico Garcia Lorca, probably mispronounced, who was killed by Franco's soldiers during the Spanish Revolution of 1936. Lorca was from Granada, I guess, in the romantic south of Spain. Andalusia, where I was determined to visit on a virtually zero budget. I set out hitchhiking over the Christmas holiday with a bundle of Lorca's poems in my backpack. Risky business because Franco had banned Lorca's poetry. Also a bit foolhardy since I didn't speak any Spanish. It was cold and dark that Christmas morning of 1969 when, after walking for several miles, I came to a small deserted town of Alicante. Rideless and desperate to complete my pilgrimage, I wandered into an empty train station, sat down on a metal chair, and dozed off. Sometime later, I heard several men enter at the far end of the station. I thought I was hallucinating when I heard one of them speaking with a distinct Maine accent. "Yeah," the voice said, "let's head there." I got up and introduced myself and asked if he were from Maine. And yeah, he said, "David Flanagan from Portland." David knew my father, then the Republican U.S. Attorney, so we talked politics and learned that he had worked on Ken Curtis's gubernatorial campaign and Peter Kairos' senior's congressional campaign. David was headed north, not south, so we exchanged contact information and then kept in touch by letter and an occasional visit. As he was attending the London School of Economics and planning a trip to Moscow and Leningrad long before he became a capitalist. That made me laugh right there. At the height of the Cold War, around the same time that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton made their train trip through Russia. A few years later, I encountered David while he was attending law school at Boston College. And 5 years later, our paths intersected when I took a job in the office of Attorney General Joe Brennan. Attorney General Brennan had a fondness for names that ended in A-N. And he hired his share of them. There was Assistant Attorney General Jim Brannigan. There was Assistant Attorney General Arthur Brennan. There was Assistant Attorney General David Flanagan and others. Before the Attorney General's back, we often refer to it as the Irish law firm of Brennan, Brannigan, and Flanagan. It was around that time that David became an expert in conservation and began fighting the timber companies to restore several 100,000 acres of public lands to state stewardship. He completed this mission while working in the office of Governor Brennan, at the same time trying to stave off an epidemic of spruce budworm in the state. You all remember that. A while ago, I came across a box in the attic with several drafts of Governor Brennan's first inaugural speech in 1979, which I gave to his archives here. These documents were notable for the lyrical and intellectual tone of the late John O'Leary, the hen scratchings of Art the Stilphin, the personal notes of Governor Brennan himself, and the many marginal notations of David Flanagan, adding a folksy and informative touch to the speech. In his many professional interactions since that time, David and Kay made it a habit to meet my husband and me for dinner every year at the Maine Bar Association conference. I will never forget the kindness you exhibited, David, when my husband became sick and you helped us get back to Farmington with as little hassle as possible. We all know that David Flanagan has done since his time in the governor's office at Pierce Atwood and CMP. He has proven to be a problem solver, an honest troubleshooter, and a dogged inspector of budgets and national disasters. A corporate and community activist, world traveler, investigator of hurricanes, ice storms, institutions of higher learning, the Washington County economy, cybersecurity clusters, public reserve lands. But between David and Janet, I'll be telling you I'm exhausted already. Public reserve lands, utility deregulation, spruce budworm epidemics, public housing, early childhood education, and ships in bottles. Irish to the bone with a map of Maine on your soul, David T. Flanagan, you will always be my friend. You will always be 6 months older than I am. Don't forget. But I always will see you in that spirit of adventure, inquiry, and honesty I saw 51 years ago in a deserted train station in northern Spain. Nothing there has changed. May you always carry a smile on your face and the map of the world on your heart. You and Kay will always be welcome at the Blaine House, where together we will solve the problems of the day and celebrate the goodness of this state and all of its people. Thank you and congratulations on your wonderful award.
Good evening, everyone. I apparently have wandered into a meeting of the Democratic Convention. But nevertheless, I am honored to be here as the token Republican to speak, to celebrate my friend David Flanagan. Now, I had this wonderful beginning of my speech where I was going to say in Gaelic that famous saying, 100,000 welcomes, because I figured that none of you would know that I couldn't speak Gaelic. But then Margaret Craven comes up here and clearly can speak Gaelic. So I'm not going to press my luck with the ancient language at all, but let me offer 100,000 thank yous for inviting me, the token Republican, to join in this wonderful and well-deserved celebration of David Flanagan. That many thank yous would be but a down payment on what we here tonight and people throughout the state of Maine owe our guest of honor. David is an outstanding choice for the Claddagh Award. Like the legendary ring that combines heart, hands, and crown, David combines the virtues of love, friendship, and loyalty. I was so honored to receive this award last year, and two memories of that evening will always remain with me. The first was joining my family and friends in singing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling, led by Pat Callahan. And the second were the kind words that David offered on my behalf. I'm so looking forward to raising our voices in song tonight for David, and I hope that the spirit of the Blarney Stone will provide me with the gift of gab to honor him as he honored me. Now, we've watched a wonderful video presentation on the highlights of David's remarkable contributions in business, education, and charitable endeavors. David is a hands-on doer who demonstrates that old Irish saying, "You'll never plow a field by turning it over in your mind." His special style of leadership combines intellect, vision, and good old-fashioned hard work. And let me illustrate with an example. The people of Maine, as we've learned from the video, will always be grateful for David's outstanding leadership of Central Maine Power during that terrible ice storm of 1998. But when our Gulf Coast was ravaged by Hurricane Katrina in 2005, our nation was stunned by the massive failure of government to prepare for and respond effectively to that disaster. As chairman of the Senate Homeland Security, I immediately launched an investigation, and at my request, David came out of retirement and stepped forward to lead that crucial investigation. And I will tell you that the significant improvements that we have seen in disaster preparation and response since then are in large measure due to David Flanagan's extraordinary efforts. And the report, which I should have brought tonight, is literally this thick, if any of you are dying to read it. We all love the famous Irish blessing that includes the line, "May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rains fall soft upon your fields." The weatherman, unfortunately, often contradicts the poet. And when that happens, we are indeed fortunate to have David on our side. As has been mentioned, David also came once again out of retirement to lead the University of Southern Maine through a challenging time. Despite his intellect and education, David seems to have a flawed understanding of what the term retirement means. But thank goodness for us that he does. David is one of those fortunate individuals who claims to trace both branches of his family tree to the Emerald Isle. But my friends, I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I have numerous credible sources in the CIA, the NSA, the DIA. There are 22 intelligence agencies. And they have produced much evidence that raises, hate to tell you this, serious doubts about David's Irish heritage. After all, he makes regular trips to Bulgaria. And he is an honorary consul for that Balkan nation. Now, who ever heard of an Irish American making more trips to Sofia than to Dublin? Not I. Now, David would tell you that the reason is the key role that he played in establishing the American University in Bulgaria, a new school established by the U.S. government in the post-communist Balkans with the help of the University of Maine system. At least that's his story, and he's sticking to it. But then there's the evidence that he speaks Russian. And he knows the difficult Cyrillic alphabet. Who knew? Who knew? Now, you don't have to take my word for this. He actually admitted those facts in an interview, I was doing my research, that he did for Bowdoin College. Now, whoever heard of an alleged Irish American speaking and writing Russian, but not Gaelic? Very suspicious. But despite these suspicious incidents, in the end, we know that David is in fact Irish. His big heart, his generosity of spirit, his warmth to family and friends, his love of state and country, his towering intellect. How could he be anything but Irish? If you're looking for evidence that the luck of Irish is for real, look no further than David's good fortune in having Kay as his partner in life. Together, they are engaged citizens with a commitment to the greater good. Among the many contributions of this remarkable couple is their leadership in building a new facility for the Children's Center in Augusta, a preschool program for children with special needs. The Irish blessing, may your home always be too small to hold all of your friends, indicates that the Flanagan home must be a very crowded place indeed, as the huge turnout tonight demonstrates. They say that if you're lucky enough to be Irish, you're lucky enough. We Irish Americans are the luckiest of all. And I want to thank the Maine Irish Heritage Center for celebrating a great Irish American, David Flanagan. Thank you.
I want to say I guess this is on. Can you hear all right? You can? Yeah. You know, I met David about 50 years ago or more. And I was up in the legislature with Jerry Conley, who was there forever at that time, and a dear friend of mine and almost everybody in this room. And David came over. He said Jerry Conley sent him over to meet me. And when I saw David, first time I ever met him, he had a beard, long hair, he dark suit, an English accent. We talked for a little while, then he, as was alluded to, started muttering Russian phrases. I said, what the hell has Conley done? He sent me a communist. And as Pat said that, he kind of seemed that way when I first met him. I kind of liked him. And he later became and is a capitalist now. But that's when I first met him. Notwithstanding that, not too long after I was district attorney, and I hired him and his friend John O'Leary. And when you hired, and John, went on to great thing as ambassador to Chile. But when you hired Flanagan, you got the whole family. David would be in the office summer, Christmas, and oftentimes he'd bring his little sister. She was about 8 years old. She'd be doing crafts and drawing in the corner. Then when I decided I wanted to run for governor, which I did 100 times, we had no money. And David said, I said, we ought to get a picture of some sort. He says, my father's got a camera. So, and they got a cellar. So we went over to the cellar, and his father was very nice, distinguished World War II veteran. He took my picture, and that's what we used, and it cost $0. If I read the papers correctly, the 2nd District race, which we're delighted with the result, $24 million. $24 million. We got to get money the hell out of politics. It's crazy. I had prepared a lot of stuff to say, but I started to think as I sat here, my good friend who's gone now, Mo Udall, a famous congressman from Arizona, great, maybe the funniest guy in the House. When he heard things, you know, same thing being said about the same people, he said, I think everything's been said, except not everybody has said it. That's what happens sometimes when you're kind of late in the line, you know, to speak. And it's true down in the House. Of course, it works in Congress because the local TV picks it up. They don't know everything you said has been said about a dozen times. But that's Congress. I want to say that David did one hell of a job for me. He really did. I can understand how he works so hard. Anybody that comes from stock, that takes a boat from Ireland to Nova Scotia and then walks all the way to Bangor. And I Googled it this morning, and that's driving 440 miles. I don't know why the Flanagans didn't do another 100 miles and come to a real city like Portland. No, so I won't be repetitive, although I've got all this stuff. Actually, O'Hara wrote most of it. One of the great writers, but he did a superb job himself. All the prize speakers were witty and such. They did a great job, so I'm not going to repeat it. You know, David and I think Mary Ann Lynch, come from large Irish families. I grew up in a family of 8 kids. David had 8. 8's a lucky number. I don't know how many. You had quite a few kids in Mary Ann Lynch's. But at any rate, David has done a super job. He's all-purpose down in Washington County trying to develop economic development, running, as it's been said 100 times, the power company, going into the university, being the chairman of the board of trustees. There's nothing he did. And work. But he comes from that type of stock. He's been a great credit to this country, to the state, and a great help for me. There's nothing he wouldn't take on. We'd be driving from Portland during all legislative days up to Augusta. I'd be driving, and David would be writing a speech. And this, particularly back in the early 70s, there was the energy crisis. In fact, Ken Curtis, then governor, I think, considered canceling an upcoming legislative session because there was such a perceived shortage of oil and so forth. And David would research these things, get the speech. It's almost like getting something right out of the oven and eating it. I'd go on the floor and read the speech and hope to hell that no one asked any questions. What do you mean, OPEC? Well, now kids in the 8th grade know that it's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Back then, it was weird. Of course, back then, talking about the environment was weird. No, but David was onto all the issues, couldn't work harder, and he's a mountain of integrity. You don't find that all the time in public office. I'm going to conclude my remarks because everything has been said, and we want to hear from him, see if he's half as good as everybody says he is. Thank you very much. David.
Well, I really appreciate all the remarks that everybody has made here tonight, and for those of you who are in the film, the check is in the mail. This is a great event. It's probably the largest gathering of people who would like to be candidates for the cabinet that Maine has seen in 8 years, and it's a great honor to be here with such a distinguished group of people, all of whom I know all of you, and I know all of you have made enormous contributions to our state. The one concern I have is that I'm afraid that my family over here at this table will not recognize who they were talking about. And I'll try to straighten them out later, but please feel free to try to convince them of the truth of what you allege. This is a wonderful evening and a wonderful award for sure. It is a little bit hard to explain what the Claddagh Award is to people from away and to alumni magazines, as I found. Often they don't understand that being Irish in Maine is an outstanding distinction in and of itself. But But tonight, as you've heard so frequently here tonight, I want to provide a public service. And that public service is to explain the 10 secrets, reveal the 10 secrets that entitle you to this award. So here they are. The first is, you got to be Irish. Maine is full of great ethnic groups, well represented here, who have all kinds of recognition, from the Jewish exhibit at the Maine State Museum now, to the great food at the Italian Heritage Center, to the Greek fairs every June, Domna, and I'm sure golf trophies for the Yankees. Well, I think you pretty much know the Irish are lousy cooks and are terrible at organizing things and pretty bad at golf. But the one thing they're good at is giving each other awards. And here to make this all possible, we are blessed with a group of volunteers dedicated to preserving the arts and crafts, the culture and values of the Emerald Isle, and this fantastic historic landmark building. Under the leadership of Vinnie and Mary, Pat and Mark, and Dan, who could make an amazing film out of the terrible material he had to work with. And I'm deeply grateful to all of you and all of the volunteers who made this event possible. So the first thing, you got to be Irish. The second thing, it really helps to be born in the USA, and especially in Maine. There are exceptions to this rule. You may remember Maura Fuller got the award, and she was actually from Connemara in Ireland. And Bill Ryan got it, even though he had the handicap of having been born in the Bronx. But if you've spent any time overseas in developing countries, as I have, comrades, you have to appreciate what a tremendous advantage it is to be an American, governed with a stable and predictable rule of law in a society largely free from construction and with the greatest personal freedom in the world. And on top of that, we are so fortunate to be from Maine, where despite all of our challenges, we have the joy of living in a place small enough that our system is manageable, our leaders are accountable, our people know and care for each other, and our stress levels are mitigated by a safe, beautiful environment and the pleasures of open space. And now, to top it all off, with Janet Mills, we finally have a governor-elect as good and decent as the people of Maine that she serves. Third rule, it's helpful to make a good choice of parents. Like the kings and queens of England, I made a very thoughtful choice of who would be good parents. Tom and Connie were both from Bangor Irish Catholic families and were card-carrying members of the greatest generation who suffered the Depression and, as John F. Kennedy said, were tempered by war, disciplined by a long and bitter peace, and proud of their ancient heritage. My mother was an exquisite baker, and my father a master woodworker. But of course, I did not learn any of their useful skills. But as my brothers and sisters can testify, they did have high aspirations for all their kids and would make any sacrifice to see us succeed. Just for example, my mother went out on her own and bought a 1956 Chevy and then learned how to drive. And she did it just so she could take my brother Terry and me from our home in Hamden up to Arno to take a course in French at the university when we were 10 years old. Just wanted to get us ahead of the crowd, I guess. It also, and this is rule number 4, and there are many people here who will be amazed to hear me say this, but it does help to have a bunch of brothers and sisters. I know this is counterintuitive. Having 7 other kids clamoring for attention and dividing the spoils. But the truth is, everybody performs better on a fast track, and having a posse of overachievers on your tail keeps you alert and alive. In fact, by the time I got to college, I was so used to the chaos of a full house that when the housing application from college went out, it gave as options for roommates none or one. But there was a little asterisk at the bottom saying there were a handful of rooms for 6 people. So I signed up for that. And 50 years later, we're still friends. In fact, my roommate Steve Potter is here from New York tonight. I can tell you that I'm very proud to come from a family where so many have accomplished so much. I'm happy to be joined here by Terry, Paula, and Lisa, and also my youngest brother, Mark, who switched shifts at St. Joseph's Hospital and drove down here tonight from Bangor. I wish Nora was here, but she's so damn conscientious. She had to work tonight. And my brother Peter is inconveniently located in Saigon, Vietnam. But he'll get a copy of the tape. And there'll be a test. The 5th rule is learning a work ethic early. It's really handy to be able to work hard. It makes up for a lot of other shortcomings. For example, I started out with a couple of very prestigious jobs. First, as a kid up in Hamden, I experienced the Maine work ethic from a neighboring dairy farmer, Clayton Couillard, who paid me $1 silver a day for baling hay. And the truth is, he grossly overpaid me. Then we moved to Portland, and as a young team, I moved up the ladder to $1 an hour, working for a used car dealer down at the end of our street, washing cars, cutting grass, fixing odometers, you know, the usual stuff. They were great formative experiences. And then rule number 6 is go to the best schools you can. When I was a child, we used to go to my grandparents for Sunday dinner, whereupon my grandfather, who was a truck driver for Railway Express, and I believe was a proud graduate of the 6th grade, would ceremoniously unfurl the weekend Bangor Daily News. And he'd take it out and he'd say, look here, these jobs over here, they're for ditch diggers, and they pay you $1 an hour, or $1 or a minimum wage. He said, then look over here on this page. These are the jobs that pay $12,000 a year, but you gotta have a college degree to get them. So after a while, it sunk in, and I got the message and went on to try to get that $12,000 a year job. The 7th rule is to work for good causes. My life has been infinitely enriched by the satisfaction of believing I was working for worthy causes. I'll never forget my old boss at CMP, John Rowe, who was a brilliant guy, observed that he had the choice of either coming to Maine to be the CEO here or heading a national magazine distribution business for 6 times the salary. And he opted for Maine because he felt that here he was delivering a necessity of life, of comfort, and of economic growth. While in the other job, he would have been in the soulless business of distributing pornography along with other magazines. I count myself extremely fortunate to have been able to build a career both in jobs and volunteer activities, working for causes I could believe in, whether providing legal services for the Maine economy and government, holding down the cost of power, managing or investigating catastrophes, a wonderful preoccupation, protecting our forests. I was so glad that Pat mentioned the spruce budworm. Too often it's forgotten these days. Or striving to manage the costs of housing and university education to make them affordable for Maine kids. And now I'm having the privilege of working for a truly transformational cause, focusing on health, education, and youth development here in Maine, the Harold Alphon Foundation. I'm truly fortunate. The eighth rule is to round up the best mentors you can. Formal education is great, but apprenticeships are even better. And I have been truly blessed, starting with my Deering High School debate coach, the formidable Elizabeth Ring, then Jerry Conley Sr., who introduced me to the world of politics down at the railroad station, and Joe Brennan, who not only sponsored me in a succession of increasingly responsible jobs, but who modeled what now is seemingly forgotten, at least in Washington, the virtues of relying on facts and telling the truth, treating people with dignity, and taking leadership responsibilities seriously for the long-term good of our state. Make a note of that and send it to the White House. I also sort of learned how to practice law from the legendary Ralph Lancaster, another Bangor Irishman, and the late Don Perkins at Pierce Atwood, and from Lee Sheps and John Patterson at the Attorney General's office. Thanks for trying, fellas. and to too many others to count, including John Rowe at CMP, Joe Wishcamper, and America's most diligent, hardest working senator, Senator Collins. I have indeed been fortunate. The ninth rule is to recruit better people than you are. Being acutely aware of my own shortcomings, although you didn't hear much about them tonight, I have long thought, talk to my brother Terry later, I have long thought it was an excellent strategy to recruit a team of people who could work together to make up for each other's deficiencies and to maximize their strengths and to actually listen to the diversity of ideas and counsel that such a team could put together. That's a common sense strategy that I'm forever puzzled is not universal in management. I had a great team at CMP. You saw one of them, Arthur Edelberg, on the tape. He later worked with me on our investigation into Hurricane Katrina for Senator Collins, together with several others, including the new president, Doug Hurling, who is here tonight, and to whom I wish the very best success in undertaking this always massive, difficult job. We managed the mythic ice storm and turned CMP around for decades of success to follow. And in tackling the near fatal problems at USM, it is inconceivable that anyone could succeed alone with all the built-in obstacles to financial sustainability. But in short order, we were able to assemble a team up to the task, including Martha Freeman and Tom Dunn and many others. But I especially want to call out our fellow Irishman, even if he is from New York, Joe McDonnell, who brought steadfast courage to the most difficult part of the job and is here tonight. Thank you all. You all have my enduring thanks and respect. The 10th and final rule is, if you can, marry well. This is a good rule and can avoid no end of trouble and turmoil. My own bride, the former Kathleen Kelleher, is a true daughter of Ireland, with parents direct from County Cork. In fact, when we looked around here the other day, we noticed they had a banner for every county and province in Ireland, except for Cork. But this terrible oversight has been corrected, and the castles now stand proudly where they should. She's actually the one who should have gotten this award, with a lifetime of contributions to the profession of psychiatric nursing. See how good I'm doing? To home care as a director of Holy Innocents, what a great name, and as a board member at Maine Medical Center, Spring Harbor, the Maine Cancer Foundation, Catholic Charities, and many other vital organizations. And besides, she plays the button accordion and knows 1,000 Irish tunes. But most of all, she's the love of my life. So there you are, 10 simple, easy-to-follow rules for getting this award, and I am deeply honored for both your being here and for your support. Thank you very much.
Now we'll have our time to present the award. Kay, if you'd like to come up, and the family, if they could come up, please. David, on behalf of the board, the members of the center, and all the volunteers, I'd like to present to you our 2018 Claddagh Award. And also, this shamrock is from the part of the marble here at the church.
The bar is open.
One last thank you.
I know it's been tough weather today, and I really appreciate all of you coming out and braving the elements for the beginning of the most wonderful season in Maine. And I wish you all safe travels on your way home. I'm sure Senator Collins knows an Irish proverb about this, but
May the wind be always at your back.
yeah, may the wind be at your back and may the snow tires be on your wheels.